Now, if you've been following the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I'm a photographer who periodically likes to mix things up when it comes to lenses. But many of my favourite photographs have actually been shot with just one lens, and that's the 21mm. Now, when I first started shooting street with the 21mm, I was all over the place. I was often too far away from the subject. I couldn't get my head round the look and the characteristics of the lens and how I really wanted to use it to say something about what I was photographing. But I persevered with it and I learned how to get the best out of it. And what I wanted to do in this video is share my reasons for using a 21mm lens in the first place, and also give you some tips and tricks that I picked up along the way. This is my 21 and I bought this back in 2001, and I bought it mainly to photograph interiors at events I was photographing. I never really considered using it for street photography, but in 2016 I saw a movie that turned my whole visual palette on its head. The movie was The Revenant. The cinematographer was Emmanuel Lubezki. This movie was an absolute masterpiece in terms of cinematography, and in particular the use of ultra wide angle lenses. Also that year I came across this. It was shot on the streets of 1980s New York, shot from the hip, shot with a 21mm lens on a Leica. I was totally blown away. I was immediately struck by the look of the images, you know, the style, the sense of space that the 21mm gave on the street. And obviously Depardon's eye goes without saying, but the 21mm added something different to his work. And I've got a few Depardon books here, and this one really stands out as being something very different. This book and The Revenant kick-started my journey with the 21mm, and since 2016 I've been using it quite extensively on the street, as well as using it for things like landscapes as well. So why do I like this lens so much? Well, like any wide angle, the 21mm is good at emphasizing things in the foreground, and I use this kind of characteristic to bring attention to the subjects while at the same time using the background to add context and narrative. The lens also creates space within the frame. Even if I'm close to the subject, you still get a sense of distance between things in the frame. You know, the lens kind of exaggerates the spatial relationship between the elements, and this helps me to be able to isolate figures in the frame, or indeed to separate them. Now, I like to use leading lines in my work, and with the 21mm, these become far more exaggerated. This can add a lot of energy to the photographs, and it can help take our eye through the image. Now, I've always liked the feeling of being part of a scene rather than just looking at the scene. If you shoot with something like a 50mm, you're always looking at a scene. Any wide angle lens will give you an immersive feeling, but the wider you go, the more immersive that feeling is. And with the 21mm, for me, I get a real sense of being up close and personal with the subject and also the environment. Zone focusing for me is essential to the way that I work. With a 21mm lens, this is really easy to do because I like to work at kind of 6 to 12 feet away from the subject. I always set my distance scale to 6 feet. Now, even at f2.8, which is the widest aperture that I have on this lens, I'm still getting 4.5 to 10 feet in focus at f2.8. So what this means practically is that it doesn't really matter if the light drops. I'm still going to be able to use a wide aperture in my work and still be able to use zone focusing quite effectively. When it comes to movement, 21mm just looks cool. Compared to something like a 50mm or 35mm, it just looks so damn good because the focal length feels ambiguous, it feels almost abstract, and having a little bit of movement in there just kind of emphasizes that. Now, there are some downsides to this lens. I'm going to be honest, there are one or two things that have caught me out as I've been working with this lens over the years. The first one, obviously, is that, you know, you have to be close to the subject. My ideal working distance with this is 6 to 12 feet. With a 28mm, it's 12 feet. I'm halving the distance already with this lens in terms of where I'm going to be working with it. If you're somebody that isn't comfortable getting close to your subject and photographing them, this lens probably isn't for you. You're always going to be too far away for the lens to have any sort of effect. You might as well use a 28 or a 35. You'll be much happier with that. Now, with this lens, the size and weight of it can be an issue. If you compare this to my 28 Elmerit lens, which is effectively the 28 version of this lens, there is a significant difference in size and weight. I always use the optional hand grip with this particular lens. It just gives me a little bit more relief, I guess, from the weight. It's really kind of tiring if I haven't got this grip. And then there is the not inexpensive but absolutely necessary external viewfinder. With Leica rangefinder cameras, the rangefinder doesn't have a wide enough field of view to take in what the 21mm sees, so you end up having to buy an external viewfinder like this one to frame the image. Mine has got frame lines for 21mm and 28mm lenses, and it works really well for me. The problem is that something like this is £600 to £700 new. If you do go for a wide angle lens on a camera which, hasn't got the field of view that you're after, you are going to need an external viewfinder, and that can add several £100s to the actual cost of everything. One of the other things I found very early on, and it's something that really caught me off guard to some extent, is the amount of visual information that a 21mm lens actually takes in. And if you combine all that information with the massive depth of field, which then makes all that information very sharp, it can make the photographs appear really busy, and then they can be really hard to look at. And it's very easy to lose the main subject in that sea of visual distraction. And finally, there's always a temptation with any lens like this to overuse it. Because the look is so unique, it's very easy to end up with a bunch of images that look absolutely identical because of the way the lens is rendering it. For me, when I started with the 21mm lens, very quickly I decided that I wanted to get away from the lens being a gimmick, and I wanted the lens to become part of how I actually saw the world. And that was a struggle for a very, very long time to get to a point where I was actually happy with how I was using the lens. So how do we get the best from the 21mm? Well, for me, it all starts with a low camera angle. Photographs taken with this lens from a low camera angle look really interesting, they look unusual, and there's less perceived distortion than when you're shooting with the camera up to eye level. I mentioned it earlier, I'm going to mention it again. You have to be close with this lens. If you want to get the best out of this lens, you have to get over that fear, and you have to shorten the distance between you and the subject. The closer you are, the better this lens looks. I can't emphasize this enough. Flare is something that works really well with this lens. If the sun is lowish, and I know I'm going to get it in the frame, I always try and work into the sun so I get that flare coming through. Flare is fantastic with this lens, and it also adds to the kind of abstract nature that the lens actually gives you when you're taking photographs with it. Now, this isn't something that I do a lot of, I'll be honest, but if you work vertically with the 21mm lens, it gives you a completely different look. It kind of exaggerates the distortion in the wrong way. It can look fantastic, particularly if you look at somebody like Jean-Luc Sieff's work. A lot of his nudes, a lot of his fashion pictures were taken with a 21mm lens held vertically. But as I say, it's not something that I do a lot of. What I do a lot of is crop the image to panoramic. It just looks so much like the old Hasselblad X-Pan images. The field of view just seems to sit just perfectly for the panoramic crop. Now, when it comes to editing the 21mm, I will never, ever use lens correction software on any of the photographs that have been taken with this particular lens. For me, if you start correcting distortion, if you start correcting vignetting, you're just going to rip the heart out of the lens's character. If I want a less distorted look, then I'll use a 28mm lens. There are some books that I can recommend on which showcase photographers using 21 and other ultra wide angle lenses, and I'll leave a link to all of these in the description below. I mentioned it earlier, for me, Manhattan Out is one of the best examples of pure 21mm shooting from the hip street photography that you're likely to come across. It's quite rare now. It can cost a little bit of money if you really want this book, but I think it's well worth getting. The pictures in here are fantastic, and they were completely inspirational to me when I first started with this particular lens. The Eyes of the City, Richard Sandler, American street photographer based in New York. This picture on the front is 21mm. There's a lot of pictures in here which are absolutely amazing, and there are a lot of pictures in here that were taken with the 21mm. I'm not sure if this book is still in print. If I've got a link for it on Amazon, then I'll leave it in the description below. But I'll also leave a link to Richard's Instagram account, so if you can't actually get hold of this book, then maybe ask him if he's got any copies left. And anyway, you can see his pictures from this book there anyway. But yeah, fantastic book, this one. The Fat Baby by Eugene Richards, documentary photography at its absolute finest. This is a great example of an ultra wide being used, a 20mm, I believe, in this case. The work in here is powerful, it's immersive, it's raw. It's just a brilliant collection of stories and a brilliant collection of photographs. It's an absolute masterclass in the use of wide angle close-up photography. Inferno, James Nachtwey. What can I say about this book? If you've got the stomach for hard-hitting photojournalism, this book will teach you everything you need to know about composition, subject placement, and using an ultra wide angle lens to create tension and to create atmosphere and mood. It is hard to look at, this book. I'm not going to lie. It is hard to look at. But if you can get past that, this is an amazing, amazing book if you're into wide angle photography and photojournalism. Absolute amazing book. And finally, an absolutely shameless plug for my latest zine 21+6, which contains a lot of the photographs used in this video. And if you want to know why it's called 21+6, you're going to have to buy the zine. Now, I'm always on the lookout for more book recommendations, particularly from ultra wide angle photographers. So if you have any, please let me know in the comments. And if you shoot with an ultra wide lens, let me know what you like and dislike about it. You know, which make and model of lens do you shoot with? I'm always fascinated to know what viewers of this channel are actually using. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.